Let's talk now to Mark Littlewood, who is Director General of the free market think tank, the Institute of Economic Affairs. Thanks very much for being with us. Controversial remarks as ever by Nigel Farage. What do you think about what he said?
Well, the key point that he was putting forward, the key policy that he was recommending, was that it would be possible for a British business to discriminate in favour of workers of a British nationality. That might actually involve that business choosing, for example, to employ a black British person rather than a white Polish person. That's not obviously possible under EU rules and regulations at the moment. It would be possible if a British government outside of the EU decided to allow companies to do that, and I don't find that a particularly controversial proposition. Clearly, if a business decided to employ large numbers of wholly incompetent British people rather than large numbers of absolutely fantastic and brilliant foreigners, that company wouldn't perform very well. But should companies have the ability to discriminate on those grounds? I think yes. Of course, what's caused this controversy is, depending on exactly how you interpret Nigel Farage's interview with Trevor Phillips, he also suggests rolling back discrimination laws more generally. And I think we should be able to have a strong, robust and adult debate about whether equalities legislation in the UK is presently fit for purpose or not, or in fact, as we become a rather more civilised, less racist, less sexist society, do we actually need the sort of laws that were dreamt up for a very different world back in the 1960s?
But the argument has been, since he made these comments, that are we a more tolerant, a more civilised society, as you put it, because of those laws? You know, that's the way round that it comes.
Yeah, I don't think it does come round that way, actually. I think that culture has changed. I can remember when I was a lad back at school in the 1970s and 1980s, casual racism was commonplace. Actually, you only need to go back and look at some sort of BBC comedies and dramas from the 70s and 80s. They're toe-curling, a good number of them, to look at now. I don't believe that's because the state has brought in a whole range of laws. I think that's because attitudes have become much more liberal and much more cosmopolitan. So were we to ever get to the nirvana of a society in which there is no racism and no sexism at all, presumably we wouldn't need an Equalities Commission and we wouldn't need any rules at all about discrimination.
Well, let me ask you that question then. I mean, to what extent is racism, in your view, still a problem in the UK employment market?
It's difficult to put a number on it, but considerably less than it was. Considerably less than it was. And if we continue to move successfully to a country in which I think people's genuine cultural attitudes are much more liberal, much less racist, much less sexist, I'm not saying there's no racism or sexism, but I'm saying the trajectory's been in the right direction in terms of living in a more liberal society, then one would think that in line with that, you wouldn't need quite such strict rules and enforcement. And I think we've got to be able to have a proper debate about whether, for example, it is too easy or too difficult for an employee to call up their employer for being racist. Is it a bit too easy or is it a bit too difficult at the moment? We need to be able to have a sensible, mature policy debate about those sort of issues without it being a fracas and a controversial storm. It's a legitimate area of public policy debate, and I'm grateful to Nigel Farage for actually opening up that debate through his comments in this Channel 4 documentary. OK, and you've had your say on that debate, so thank you very much indeed. Mark Littlewood, their Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs.